Welcome to the Golden Age of Cardboard podcast, where we remember a time when stacks of cards were held together with rubber bands and Mickey Mantles were put in bike spokes. We hope you will enjoy and reminisce as you come along with us as we tell stories about the baseball cards from the Golden Age of Baseball. We will examine the state of the vintage baseball card market and talk to some of the greatest collectors in the hobby. You won't be hearing us talk about any chrome or shiny cards here. Now, to take you on this retrospective journey, here's your host, direct from the shallow end of the gene pool, my son, Mike Moynihan.
Yo and hello everybody. Welcome to Golden Age of Cardboard. Hopefully your favorite vintage sports card podcast. Who am I kidding? It's not sports card. We talk baseball cards on this show. And I'm going to apologize in advance. I have kind of an unstable internet connection, so I hope my audio is okay. That's really what matters to me. The video's kind of irrelevant because we're just going to be talking on this episode. And tonight my guest is a longtime friend of mine and fellow hobbyist. We're going to talk through a topic that I think is something a lot of collectors think about and maybe just don't, verbalize it. So I'm going to bring him on right now. I hope he's there. Let's see. Oh, he's there.
Woo! Sorry.
Somebody in their car listening to this is cursing you right now because they're like, what the heck? It's Joe, Silver Jackify on YouTube. Hey, Joe, how you doing? Welcome to the show.
Doing good. That was an awesome intro. Thank you.
I just said, what am I good? I told him before, I'm like, I'm going to give you a great intro. And I'm like, yeah, he's just this guy. That
I'll take it. I am just this guy.
You are a guy. We've known each other for years now. Done many fun things at the National. We've been to Yankees games together in New York. I mean, we've done some fun stuff, and I have to tell you that you are the person that I have the most fun with in the hobby. I just want you to know that. I have more fun with you. I laugh more with you than anyone else, and I appreciate that about you.
Feelings mutual, Mike. We were just talking about the two of us going to be at the National in Cleveland, and I'm looking forward to it. But you'll be the one that I hang out with probably the most when I'm there. So, I'm looking forward to it. I'm already, like I said, I just booked my hotel. I actually booked it in downtown Cleveland because I figured, my wife's going to come with me. She's going to take in the experience. So she's going to hang out in downtown Cleveland, but I'm looking forward to hanging out and maybe seeing a game together even. We'll see a Guardians game.
I might be the only YouTuber that's actually met your wife.
Yeah, probably. I don't think she's ever shown up on an episode, on one of my episodes ever. She's like, I don't think she's even been in a
That's
single episode.
Yeah, it's a good point. But you've met Julie too.
Yeah.
We were all in New York together and went to a game. But man, that's going to be a lot of fun in Cleveland again. When we roomed together in AC. Yep. If we want to call that rooming together, we were more like praying every minute during the evening that we wouldn't be, broken into. And
yeah, there was a bum sleeping outside where we were staying at. Like you had to, in order to get out of where we were staying at, you had to like walk over him to get past.
Hey, this is a politically correct channel. He was home challenged.
Yeah, home challenged.
He was home challenged, and he slept on a mattress outside of our door. Yeah, that was great. That's what you hope for in an Airbnb every time. So what I want to talk about tonight, Joe, is the first question I have for you is your collection's amazing. I've always been an admirer of the way you collect. I love the way you collect. And I've watched it evolve and change over the years. and you're a good guy that you mix vintage and some modern. You do the Rookie Explosion box by Filmington. You do some things that allow you to scratch that itch of buying current cards, right? But you're predominantly a vintage guy, I think, at heart. Is that true?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's my I mentioned to you before. My dad's really the one that got me into collecting, and I grew up in the '80s, like a lot of people probably listening, and went to a lot of shows. And my dad was the one that kind of showed me the all the tools that I still use today, which is around quality over quantity. He really preached to me the importance of the condition of a baseball card. And he was also, as really into the 1952 top set, because that was the set that he grew up collecting. And so a lot of times, when I was a kid, I'd go to shows, and I would, as a kid, I'd buy a box of '89 Don Russ and open a bunch of packs. But I would buy my packs, but then we'd spend almost the second half of the show looking for a nice vintage card, for his collection. We would spend, we'd walk up and down the aisles and try to find a really nice, like, we never spent a ton of money. Our budget was always pretty small, but we would always try to find a common card from the 1952 top set. And my dad grew up as a Cleveland Indians fan, and so sometimes we try to get a Cleveland Indian if we could, but it was always like, let's find a common 52 tops card, maybe a Cleveland Indian, maybe a Yankee, because I was a big Yankees fan, that was in great condition. And it was part of the fun was the hunt to try to find that card, like trying to, with $50 or $40 or whatever we had, trying to find a like perfectly centered 1952 tops card that, was in pristine condition. And so that's sort of why I've, been, like you said, a vintage collector at heart. Like, I collect modern cards because that's what I did when I was growing up. But but what was really fun was trying to find that great looking, even if it was a common card, vintage card, from the 50s. So that's probably part of the reason why I'm a big vintage collector fan at heart.
And how would you say that, because this is going to be the topic of the episode, is how we change as collectors in terms of what we collect, what we like. How would you say that has evolved for you? And people think when I say we evolve as collectors, I think they mean that I mean it's demeaning. It's not. It's just our likes and desires change over time. And I think that's very natural. What has your journey in that regard been? Even just the change I've seen in you in the last year or two, like maybe go back and then kind of bring us up to the current.
Yeah. So I started my YouTube channel, I'd say about 8 years ago now. So it's, one of the guys that's been around for a little bit longer. When I first started doing YouTube and, really getting back into the hobby again, a lot of if you go back to one of my first videos, I did a tips video, because I knew there was some people watching that I wanted to give some advice, and they were very like high level, tips. And so in a lot of ways, nothing has changed in terms of, the stuff that I preach. I always preach, quality over quantity, and buy the card and not the grade type of stuff. And so in terms of the main things that I focus on, that hasn't changed too much. But what I've noticed for me, and I guess everyone's collecting journey is different, is while those things haven't changed, one thing that I've started to really really focus on, and I mentioned this on my New Year's resolutions, is even almost like doubling down on on what I want to do. So when I say, I want to do quality over quantity, like I'm almost like talking about taking it to the next level where, at the end of the year, every year I do my top 20, 50 cards for the year. And I thought how cool would it be at the end of 2024 to say, I only picked up 8 cards for the entire year and just really, really focus on like 8 to 10 cards that are just total quality cards for my collection and really, focusing on sort of downsizing my collection from, having thousands of cards to maybe focusing on like, for the year, I focus on 8 cards. But then in addition to that, not only focusing on the quality of the cards that I'm purchasing, but one of the other things I've started to kind of enjoy is the idea of selling. And it's weird because, growing up, I always loved to collect. And I always had this kind of dream of setting up at a card show. That's always been a dream of mine. And but I've never set up at a card show. In fact, until 2 years ago, I had never even sold a card in my entire life. So, I'm 45 years old. I hadn't sold a single card in my entire life until I was like 43 years old. Never sold it. Now I gave away some cards, you guys, and Mike, I've done the epic giveaways, and I used to have like a whole thing where I had like songs about it, and it was fun. It was fun doing the giveaways. But up until a couple of years ago, I didn't really start to sell. And what I've noticed is that actually can be a lot of fun. And I don't. It's weird saying that because I think there's like a weird. It's almost like a bad thing to say. I don't even know if you agree, Mike, but there's almost like a negative connotation to saying that I'm a collector, but I also sell. I don't know. Maybe that's just in my head, but the idea of, like if you're a true collector would never sell his cards. And so I've always had that in the back of my head. So I've never really sold any cards. But what I've started to enjoy is, if there are cards that are in my collection that, I don't care about, that are collecting dust in my, closet, why not, sell those cards, take advantage of some of the collection that I don't care about as much, and then use that money to purchase, the cards that I do want to add to my collection. So that's been a big shift in my mindset is really enjoying, starting to enjoy that aspect of collecting. So.
Well, don't you think motivation matters? Like, why are you doing it? And I would argue that if you're selling cards that you no longer have interest in, or you're wanting to move on, which is this whole part of evolving as a collector, right? As you go, I've kind of enjoyed having that, but I want this. And so without significant outlays of cash, a lot of people run a self-sustaining hobby where they're either buying boxes and breaking them and selling singles in order to fund other card purchases. That's become more and more typical, I think, for guys or girls, for people in the hobby. I think that's completely acceptable. If your motivation is to become a dealer,
mm-hmm.
I think that's a different angle than I'm a collector. I've got these other things that I'm not as excited about anymore. I want to turn those into something I can be excited about for my collection. Yep. I know guys that will buy cards and hold them for a little while and they're ready to move on to the next thing, versus guys that buy a card, they like it, they move on to the next thing, but just keep the thing that they, some guys sell that, some guys just stick it in the closet and it collects dust, like you said. Right. So I don't think either one is wrong. I'm not a big seller of my own. Like, I buy cards for myself. I've been selling a lot more lately only because I've been acquiring collections and being part of Chasing Cardboard and some other things that are where selling is just part of it. That doesn't mean that in every collection from Chasing Cardboard, I find cards that I want for my collection. And then I buy those, and then they, Ty and crew sell the rest, and I don't feel bad about that. I'm not like, oh, we need to keep all of the, well, you can't keep, for most people, you can't keep everything, right? And so I think your motivation is in the right spot. If you want to get leaner and meaner in your collection, so to speak, you're going to have to either win the lottery or sell some cards. Those are kind of your two options. And I think maybe you're thinking that people look down on you for that. I think that's in your mind, because I think most people would say, yeah, that's just smart. That's just wisdom. And that's what, when I talk about this evolution as a collector, as we grow as collectors in terms of our experience, right? You kind of learn what you like, what you don't like. When we were all young, we bought 89 Donruss packs, we wanted current players because that's who we were watching and that's who we saw. I always loved vintage, but I could never afford it. So I just bought the current, bought what I could afford. As we've gotten older, our discretionary incomes have increased. Our tastes might have changed over time. I graduated from being a player collector. Not that I don't know older guys that are player collectors. That's great. I don't want to just be a single player collector. It felt very narrow to me. I wanted to expand the breadth of my collection. And so you still have to put guardrails up, right? Because you can't buy everything. And so that's what I try to have, some guardrails. You can't I'll just buy anything that is cheap. It's got to have a purpose. So when you think of these 8 cards, Joe, or whatever, however many number of, this kind of getting lean and mean, what types of cards, give me some examples of some cards maybe that fit into that category for you.
Oh man, that's such a great question. I try to keep, I think I mentioned, when I did my New Year's resolution video, I mentioned some cards, but, and I'll get into some of that in a little bit, but, I think mainly I try to keep my mind open to any possibility or opportunity that I stumble upon, because I don't want to limit myself to certain cards, because if I limit myself to like 1 or 2 cards, then I might miss out on an opportunity for some other great items. Every day I feel like, and that's the beauty of this hobby, right? Is that every day I learn something new, right? Every day I learn about a card that I didn't even know existed before. And I know you're a huge fan of Dave Blue Jacket 66, but every time I watch one of his videos, I learn about a card that I didn't even know existed. And I've been doing this, like I said, for 45 years, and I'm consumed in collecting. It's all it's all I think. I'll be on the train, I have an hour commute to the city, and it's all I think about sometimes. And I'm doing research and trying to understand everything I can learn about collecting, because I love it. And I'll watch a video, of someone like him, or Enough Said Cards, and they'll start teaching me about a card that I didn't, of a Babe Ruth card that I didn't know existed. And so I feel like, I'm still learning, as a collector. It's funny to say that at my age, but there are so many cards that I learn about every day. And I'm like, wow, like how cool is it that there's this, ice cream card of Babe Ruth from 1923 or something like that, and then I'm like, wow, and then I find out how much it's going to cost me, and I'm like, oh, never mind. So it's been really fun, and that's part of the evolution for me, is learning about some of these oddball kind of, cards of, vintage players that I didn't know existed. So that's been a lot of fun. But then of course I say that, but then I'm also drawn back sometimes to the cards that I've wanted for so long. So it's like this, you know, I've been wanting the T206 Ty Cobb bat off shoulder or bat on shoulder now. Um, you know, the show in Chicago, Mike, where I bought the Cap Anson, the 1888 Cap Anson. I went to that show with two cards in mind. I had two cards. It was the Cap Anson and it was the Ty Cobb bat off shoulder, which side story, like the fact that I ended up in the, like, before I had even gotten to the National, meeting a guy that had that Cap Anson card, the odds of that happening, like, so for those of you that don't know, I went to the National in Chicago, and what was that, like 5 years ago, Mike? 4 years ago?
It was 2018.
2018, right? So I go to
No,
I go
no,
to
no, I'm
Chicago,
sorry, 2019. 2019. So yeah, almost 5 years ago. Yeah.
right. So I fly to Chicago, and I arrived that morning. I like to fly early, so I had, you know, flown in the morning, and I was just about to head into the National. But before I went in, I went to the bar at the hotel lobby.
Always
And
good to get liquored up before a
yeah,
card.
of
Yes.
course. And you know, having my eggs and coffee, and who knows, maybe a mimosa too. And this guy sat next to me with one of the most incredible T206 collections I've ever seen. And have you seen this guy's collection? Do you know what I'm talking about, Mike?
Dude, I don't remember his name, but I know
Yeah,
who you're talking
yeah. So he sits down next to me, and he shows me the most amazing T206 collection. And he knew I was interested in the Ty Cobb, but he told me he's not interested in selling it because he was, that's all he did, was he collected T206 cards. But he had watched a video of mine, and he asked me, he's like, I know that, you know, you mentioned the Cap Anson as well. Are you interested in that card? And he showed me, and it was a PSA 5 Cap Anson, one of the most beautiful cards I've ever seen in my life. And it was exactly the card I was looking for. And the pop on that card is, I don't know, 30, 40 cards in the world graded by PSA. So the fact that he was sitting there next to me was incredible to begin with. And, you know, I said, you know, maybe I'll be interested. I walked the floor, and you walk the entire floor. I think I saw one other Cap Anson there, and it was like a 2. It was like a, you know, like somebody ran over that card. And I saw, after I walked the entire floor, I saw him, and I asked him if the card was still available. He said yes, and I paid him right there on the spot. The most I've ever spent on a card in my entire life. I spent $11,000 on that card in the middle of the National. I PayPal'd him right there on the floor of the National. And so that was the most I've ever spent on a card in my entire life. And but anyway, back to your, I don't know if I'm going all over the place, but yeah, you know, my focus is on vintage cards. You know, if we're talking about the 8 cards, they would probably be guys that are, you know, huge names, big names.
Yeah, you're known as the goats guy. You love
Yeah,
the goat, right?
the goats. Yeah, the goats. Yeah, so it'd probably be, you know, I'm a big fan of that 88 Goodwin Champion set. I'd love to add the Harry Beecher from that set, the first ever football card. There are some T206 cards I'd love to add to my collection, but I think one of my focuses this year will be on, as I was kind of alluding to, it would be buying a card that's a little off-brand, like one of those, you know, like a Babe Ruth, but a Babe Ruth of some brand you've never heard of, and, you know, a low or high grade. There was that recently. I was looking at an REA auction at the end of the year, and there was. Have you ever seen that Ty Cobb cabinets card? You know, like the bigger.
The
You know what I'm
T3.
talking about?
Yep.
Yes.
The T3. Yeah.
I bid on that card because it's one of the most beautiful cards I've ever seen. And unfortunately, I was outbid, but I could see myself trying to pick up something like that this year. You know, these are big cards, but you know, and that's you know, in order to pick up those types of big cards, you really have to, you know, you can't be buying a lot of other cards, and you got to sell some other cards to make that happen. So you kind of see where I'm going, right?
Do you think the hobby in general is moving that direction? Because I've been trying to buy some of those types of cards. REA is a great example of one I just got absolutely hammered in. I didn't win anything. In that, I was trying to win a DeLong Gehrig. I got blown out of the wall. I didn't really get blown. It got to my limit, like upper limit, and I'm like, no, I'm just not going to pay that. And then I tried to do a 34 Gaudy Gehrig, the yellow one. He's got the green and the yellow.
Oh, that's such a great card. Yeah, yeah, that's the other card I want.
I didn't get that. Did you know Gehrig only has 5 cards from his playing days?
Wow. So the DeLong, the 33 Gaudy, the 2 34 Gaudis.
Yep. And there's 2 33 Gaudis, right? The 160 and the 92. The 34 Gaudis, and he has a 32 US caramel. So I think I watched a guy's video about the 5, and he counted the 33 just once because it's really the same picture, right? It's not really a different card. It's just got a different number. So the 32 US caramel. So that's it. Like in terms of mainstream cards, and the video I watched was fascinating because they're all low pop, relatively speaking, compared to Ruth or Cobb or some of these other guys. And so Gehrig's kind of one of the really scarce guys out there. I'm giving you fodder so that you can maybe target some Lou Gehrig stuff. I think you have what Gehrig stuff do you have that's vintage? Do you have any of those 5?
The only card that I have is the 33 Gaudy Gehrig.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And I couldn't even tell you which number it is. Like to me, it's like it's the same card. So I never really cared about which one's which. For some reason, that's just not. I'm kind of like that with T206 cards too. Like I don't care what the back of the T206 card is for some reason. I just don't. I don't get. I think some of the backs are cool, but I don't know why you would pay. Well, I do know why, but it's just not an interest for me. I'd rather get a Piedmont of like a really nice looking Piedmont than a crappy looking,
Polar bear.
Polar bear, right? One of the most.
Yeah,
exactly.
I love the polar bear black backs though because of the blue.
Yeah, they are cool.
They are really cool. That's an evolution for me, getting more into pre-war. And I'll tell you why, because this is what's been happening in my collector brain over the last year and a half, maybe 2 years, is I have all the mantles, but the 52 tops, right? And you have one of those, so don't ever invite me over because you'll be missing that card. But I have all of them. And so when I go to shows and I see them, I'm like, I already have, like, I don't know how to describe it. It's like, it's not that I don't care. That seems a little harsh, but I'm not interested in those. Like I've got them. I've had them for a long time, most of them. And so once I got the 53 tops, which was kind of my last one recently, to fill my run minus the 52 tops, it's been like, okay, I have all the Clementes. I have all the Aarons. And I'm not trying to flex here. I'm just trying to say that stuff doesn't interest me anymore because it's in my collection. It's funny how we're only interested in things we don't have in our collection.
Oh, right. Absolutely. Yeah. That's another thing, by the way, that I'd love to finish my base mantle run. That's another thing that I'll probably focus on this year. And you can't go wrong with Mickey Mantle cards at all. It's such a great, every single one of them are fantastic. But yeah, I'd love to finish off.
One of the first episodes we ever did together on this show was how Mantle is the GOAT of the hobby.
Oh, absolutely.
And he still is. Anybody that doesn't think that doesn't know what they're talking about. I'm just being honest. And I'm not even a Mantle. I mean, I appreciate what he did, but he's a Yankee, so how good can he really be, right? I'm just kidding. Mantle's the GOAT. What Mantle cards are you missing for your base run?
So 54 Bowman. Let's see, the some of the 60s cards. I pretty much, I think I think I have this 1960 tops, the 1964 tops, but I'm missing a lot of the 60s cards. But I have the big ones, I have the 51 Bowman, the 52 tops, the 52 Bowman. Was it last year or the year before that? I picked up the 53 tops. So I got and then of course I have the 56 tops. So I mean, and then I got the 59. So some of the bigger, like in terms of finishing off the run, like I got the big ones out of the way. So now it's just a matter of knocking off. But then, I've gotten to a point now where I'm like, if I'm going to get that, a mantle that I've never had before, I have to get it like in a high grade. So it may seem like an easy task, considering the cards that I already knocked off the list. It's going to take me a while because I'm probably not going to just settle for, like a 58 tops that isn't like perfect. Like I'll probably want like a high grade 58 tops, which is going to take me a while to get.
Sure.
So, yeah.
So. I have a nice Bowman rookie.
Yes, you do. That is a really nice. I am very jealous of that 51 Bowman mantle that you have.
But you have a 52 tops, which I am jealous of. I decided that's going to be like when I finish my 4-decade run of all the Hall of Famers, the 52 tops is going to be the last card I buy to finish that project. And, but we're getting back to the point of the 50s, 60s, 70s stuff. It's like the more I attend shows, the more I watch YouTube, the more I search eBay, that stuff's pretty commonplace. And so now I'm trying to go for the uncommon. I'm trying to do just like you're doing. I'm going for stuff that I never really, that I want to learn about, like T26s, right? And I don't want to go into it completely just void of knowledge about it. But I just find it cool because the discovery part is what makes cards. Does that make sense? Like discovering something and discovering the history of the set, the player, the whatever. I know you have a big fascination with Rube Marquard, right? Or Rube Waddell. Sorry, not Marquard.
Yeah. Right.
And, you got his card because you heard his story or you read it in Glory of Their Times or whatever, right? And what are you drinking, by the way? I just want to be jealous.
That is a martini.
Nice. Shaken, not stirred, or?
Shaken, and then lots of olive juice.
So lots of dirty. You're really dirty.
Dirty.
So Rube Waddell was a player that you found fascinating, and you wanted to make that connection complete by getting one of his cards, right? And I think you got a T26 of him or something. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that is so incredibly fascinating, like that's exactly such a great point. Like, and that's what's so fun about some of the common players from the the T26 set or any pre-war. Is you really some of these players, I mean the backstory that they have is incredible. I mean, Rube Waddell's story is crazy, like about everything you learn about him, how he used to wrestle bears in the off season, and how he used to he'd be on the mounds throwing a no-hitter and then hear a fire truck and go and just run off the mound and just go chase after a fire truck. But then you'd hear about stories about him, out dueling Cy Young. So like he sounds like he's crazy, but he's also he was so incredibly talented. And then how he died of pneumonia, trying to save a family from a flood, or save people from a flood from his like local town, and and his story is, it's not. While his story is crazy, like. Every time you look, you dive into some of these, players, you learn that, of course, a lot of these guys, they weren't able to live on just a baseball salary. So they had to do something else. And a lot of times, when you're playing baseball, what kind of job are you really going to be able to hold down? So they have some of the oddest some of these players, you learn about what they did, as their side job, as their side hustle. And it's always like fascinating, the types of stuff they did. So, yeah, that 100%, like that's part of the fun of some of these. And that's part of the reason why, I like the idea of getting into cards that I want to research, because I get to learn about the player. I get to learn about the set, like where, how did it, how did somebody get a card like this? Like, were they at the bottom of a Cracker Jacks box? Were they, a coupon that you ripped off the side of a milk carton and then you sent it in? And, it's just these fascinating stories about the sets and the players. And so that's part of the reason what draws me into some of these, pre-war cards, and especially like oddball cards, a little bit more lately.
I don't know if you want me to tell everybody this, but I don't think a lot of people know that your side hustle as a gigolo has helped you buy a lot of cards, and that's great.
Don't tell Pepino, man. He might.
He might be sending you a check for the national.
He'll be, so Caesar will be like, "Oh, I heard you're a gigolo."
Dude, me too, is what he would say. He's like,
let's go on the road.
If you've followed my baseball collector channel and watching some things, that the stuff I've been really excited to pick up all the stuff that I need and the mainstream stuff, but I didn't have any Walter Johnson cards, so I got a T26 portrait. I didn't have a Mathewson card, so I got a T206 example of him. There are these greats. I didn't have a Cy Young, so I got a Cy Young card, T206. Awesome. These guys that are just legends, mythical in the baseball world. I wanted to complete that circle of connection to me to buy a card and own a card of that player. I don't need all of Christy Mathewson's cards or Cy Young's or Walter Johnson's, but I wanted one, to say, hey, someone comes over and says, do you have a Walter Johnson card? And I can say yes. Is that kind of like, are there players that you feel like these GOATs, these greats, that you feel like, man, I need a card of this guy? Who would come to mind?
Oh yeah. I mean, absolutely. There are certain players that like definitely annoy me that I don't have their cards. And I feel like it's weird because I've always, people ask me like, what is your focus when it comes to collecting? And it's really owning, like, it's almost like owning the history of baseball, and with a touch of, basketball and football. And there are definitely some players that I don't own a single one of their cards, and I'm kind of embarrassed to admit that. I don't own any Tris Speaker cards, and he's one of the greatest players of all time. I don't own any Jimmy Fox cards. I don't really own any like, I own like a one or two Stan Musial cards, but I kind of find it embarrassing that I don't really have any big cards of his. But yeah, those things, bought like, and so when you mentioned Walter Johnson and Cy Young and Christy Mathewson and Ty Cobb, like, how am I supposed to? It's like, how am I supposed to be somebody that says I'm a collector of the history of baseball if I don't have those names in my collection? Like, if I don't have those names in my collection, I feel like I'm not telling the story of baseball. Which, by the way, not to get on a sidetracked, but it's what bothers me about the Hall of Fame. I don't understand how you could tell the story of the Hall of Fame without, Pete Rose and Barry Bonds. And I don't want to get too sidetracked, but that's what bothers me. Like, I feel like if you're going to have the Hall of Fame, you need to have, how do you have the Hall of Fame without the guys that brought you out of what could have been the collapse of baseball after the 94 strike? You have Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa, who basically saved baseball. And, of course, they don't even have a whiff at getting into the Hall of Fame. But yet you guys, some of the guys that just got in, while they're, Todd Helton, great player and all, but, if I'm telling the history of baseball, I could tell it I'm going to start making people angry here.
You are. You need to be careful because I can hear people unsubscribing from your channel right now. No, I mean, look, there are people that and by the way, I agree with you. Bond should be in, Clemens, all those guys. There are people that would say on the other side of that they are represented in the Hall of Fame. There's Barry Bonds artifacts in the museum telling that his story and what happened in '98 and what happened in '03 or '02, whatever year it was that he broke the record again.
Yeah.
And then there would be people that would argue that Cal Ripken really brought, when he broke Lou Gehrig's streak in '96, that's what got people interested in baseball again. So for every point the point is you want a comprehensive story in your collection. So you have Barry Bonds cards. I have to give you some crap. You don't have a Nolan Ryan rookie, and that just bothers me to a lot of degrees.
Yes, that bothers me as well. Believe me, it bothers me as well. And I feel like at every show, I always look at the Nolan Ryan cards. You know, a nicely centered Nolan Ryan card is not easy to find. It is a tough card to find. That is a tough set too. You know, there's always like, you know, you see my collection. I'm very, you know, focused on eye appeal and so I always feel like the card's never good enough. Like it's never, like it's not, you know, I could pick up a Nolan Ryan, no problem. But at this point, you know, 45 years into my collecting journey, for me to pick up a crappy Nolan Ryan, I don't think would do it justice at this point. So now I've kind of put myself in a box where I'm like, if I'm going to buy a Nolan Ryan card, it better look fantastic. And so I end up going to shows, and you know, it'll be a little off center, or there'll be a jaggedy edge, and I'll be like, you know, I'll take a look at it, I'll be like, it's just not good enough, and I'll pass on it. And then I'll see like a card that's, you know, worthy, and it's like way above anything that I'm willing to spend. So that's sort of the conundrum that I'm in right now with the Nolan Ryan rookie.
Welcome to all of our conundrums. we all are faced with that.
Yeah.
As I'm sitting here, I'm trying to think of big glaring holes, and it's not even in players necessarily as much. I've kind of filled a lot of those with the Young and the Wajo and, you know, some other Christie and those types of things, but I don't have a Cobb card, which is a big hole for me.
Embarrassing.
I don't have I think the oldest Ruth I have is the 49 leaf. So I don't have any I don't have any of the Gowdy Ruths. My favorite's the 33 card number. Is it 188 or what? 144, whatever it is, where he's batting.
Yep.
That's a huge card that I would love to own, and a crazy expensive card. And we turn into old men, I think, too. Our evolution as a collector is we remember when these certain cards were much cheaper, and we're like, this is ridiculous. I can't believe, you know, this card is so much. I could have bought it 2 years ago for half the price or whatever. And it's not a regret as much as it is I don't like where card price. It's like, dang it. It just, and I can't change it, but I always remember that. I've said this before. I remember cards I didn't buy more than I remember the great deals that I've gotten on some amazing cards over the years. I remember the ones that got away, you know. But those holes, like I'd love a 49 Bowman Jackie, right? I'd really love a 49 Leaf too. And those are those are big cards. You got a 49 Leaf 2 years ago at Atlanta. I was with you when you purchased it.
You helped me negotiate.
What's that?
I said you helped me negotiate on that card.
Well, you did a pretty good job on. I was there for moral support, I think. I was agreeing that you should buy it.
Yeah, it helped that I like literally couldn't go any higher. Like it was like I don't have another dollar to give you. I was like, this is as high as I could go. It's as much money as I can give you.
And weren't you that was a negotiation with like the guy who owned the card didn't even have. It was auction house or something that owned it or was holding it or consigning it for the guy or whatever.
Yeah, he was like in England, I think.
Yeah.
Too. The seller was in England, and so I was like negotiating through somebody at the show who was talking to the guy in England as what price he was willing to sell his Jackie rookie for.
Crazy.
That was a little bit of a gamble too, because if you remember it, like the slab was cracked, and that was kind of nerve wracking to spend that much money on a Jackie rookie and seeing that the slab cracked. But I think we all kind of looked at it and we didn't have any concerns about authenticity or anything like that. I think we did have some concerns that maybe it would grade lower if I got it re-slabbed. So it was a little bit of a risk, but it worked out pretty nicely for me.
You got it in a fresh slab, and you got it. That was well done. It's funny as we're talking, and I hope people listening hear that, and kind of bringing this full circle is it's okay to move around the hobby, to find different areas of the hobby that you feel like you want to explore and enjoy. And that, doesn't make you a bad collector. It doesn't. And maybe I'm doing this as therapy for Joe to make him feel better, but it just means you're changing, and wisdom is where knowledge and experience, kind of, you get that over time. You're not born with wisdom, you acquire wisdom. And as you're moving through your collecting journey, Joe, you're getting just wiser about yourself and what really matters to you. The things that you thought mattered to you when you bought them 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 3 years ago, just may not have the same appeal. And moving on from that, I just have a problem moving on. I have a Josh Hamilton collection, collecting dust in my closet that I would love to liquidate, and I probably should do that. Even if I can only get pennies on the dollar, it'll free up space. It'll give me some money that I can put towards a card that I would really enjoy. I never look at my Hamilton stuff. It's just sitting there, and it just makes me mad though every time I pull it out, because I realize how much money cumulatively I spent on Josh Hamilton. But making a mistake is okay. It's okay to make mistakes.
I'm not sure if it's a mistake though. If you really enjoyed the process of doing it, maybe it was a mistake.
That's a good point. I did enjoy that part of it.
I started to think about my some of the cards that I bought, Greg Bird and Miguel Andujar and some of the prospects that I've Gleyber Torres. Oh yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, the list goes on and on. And what, yeah, I'd probably call it a mistake a little
bit. But you learned something, right? And so any final thoughts you want to tell everybody out there about evolving as a collector, and have you learned anything tonight about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I thought was really interesting, I was at a card show about a week or two ago, and I walked the floor, and I purchased a couple cards, but what I enjoyed more than anything was spending time talking to a lot of the dealers that just had these amazing, experiences, and it was really fascinating to see them reflect on, it was funny. A lot of the dealers that I met with are retired, and, that's what they do now. Like they don't have a full-time job anymore. They're retired, and they sell baseball cards, and they love what they do. And I guess, in terms of, that is one thing that as I evolve, as a collector, I do wonder, maybe that is something, that I might want to consider it at some point, is, because like what they're living is like almost like my dream. Like they they don't have any, stress of, working a 9 to 5 anymore. Obviously I'm not ready to retire anytime soon, but the beauty of being able to retire and then enjoy, making that, some extra money just and doing what you love, selling cards. But then, more than anything, I talked to a guy, a dealer, for about 30 minutes. And while this poor guy was talking to me for 30 minutes, he didn't sell a single card because he was too busy talking to me. But I could tell he didn't care. Like, he was just like, he was having so much fun telling me about, his collecting journey. And it didn't matter that he wasn't, making any sales. Like, what mattered to him in that moment was telling me, his stories and his collection and his, some of he was showing some personal collection stuff that I could only dream of. And so anyway, I guess, I guess the main thing is to like you said, Mike, is just to always evolve as a collector. Don't feel like you have to stick, like, up until 2 years ago, I was only somebody that would buy cards. I would never sell cards. But now I've gotten into selling cards, and who knows, maybe I'll get into selling cards and then I'll get back into modern. Who knows? And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, following what you love to do, and focusing on that and not worrying about like expectations of other people around you, I guess is what I'll leave it with.
All right. I have one last question for you, because I've been fascinated. As long as I've known you, I don't know the answer to this. When you are wherever you're shooting a video, I never see cards other than if you're at your table, you might set a few up. And I know I've seen a lot of cards in your collection over the years. You've got a lot of cards. Do you have like a secret door, like to a secret, like the back cave, the card cave, where you store everything? Where do you put, because you have hundreds and hundreds of slabs. Where are your cards?
Yeah, I mean, they are hidden, and in some cases they're locked up like I've got that safety deposit box at the bank, but I don't, I got my little secrets of where I hide, where I've got my but it's weird because it's like it's chaos. Like, to anybody else, my collection would be chaos. Like, I feel so sorry for my wife and my kids, like, when they have to deal with all this crap, and they they see, like, they find cards like that they didn't like. They're like, what the heck? They'll be digging, they'll be finding cards, probably years after I pass. They're like, oh my God, Joe had more cards in the corner there. So that's one of the things that I always think about, is like, oh my God, I feel bad. Hopefully my son gets into collecting, because then I won't have to like figure out, won't have to pass along to, my wife or daughter who could care less about cards. But yeah, I don't keep them all in one spot. They kind of like, they're all in their special places throughout the house, or in in a safety deposit box. But but and the only person that know, but for me, it's all in a very, like, it's cataloged the way that my head works.
It only makes sense to you. It only makes sense to
exactly. You. Like, I've made some videos, like, where I go through my process. Like, I have my high end cards, and then I've got my like briefcase cards, and then I've got slabs that make it to the second briefcase, and then I've got cards that like are good enough to get into a top loader, but then there's and then there's cards that go into the binder. Like, I have a whole system that only I understand, and I've tried to explain it in certain videos, and some people enjoy it, because like I think everyone's got their own system, like you do, but behind you.
Well, they like to. I think people, and I know this because I feel this way. I like to hear how other people do it. I don't have a monopoly on the best way to store cards or organize my collection, and so hearing other people, sometimes when I hear your video, I'm like, dude, I would never do that. That's idiotic. But no, I'm just kidding. But we all have different ways, and my system has evolved, to keep using that word, from picking this idea from one person, another idea from another person, and this idea, and I admire how people organize their collections. I find it part of the collecting process and enjoyment is the way we organize and in ourselves and get a collection into its, or a card into its collection home. You know, there's a process to that. So I just had to ask you because it's so funny. I don't know where any of your cards are, so that's okay.
Yeah, I count, like, I've been getting into cataloging all my cards in VCP, so that's been kind of like, I know you do the PSA registry, but
I do VCP also.
Oh, you do? Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I've been, like, every card that I add to my collection, I add to the VCP, and then if I sell a card, or I remove it and I put, so that's sort of the best organization that I have is that list that I have in VCP. Otherwise, it's a big mess.
So I'm going to summarize what you said in this whole video, and we're going to close it down. Sell modern, buy vintage. I like it. That's a great motto to leave people with. And thanks, Joe, for coming on the show again. And thanks for making me laugh and having a good time. Appreciate you.
We're gonna have a good time in Cleveland, man. I promise.
Oh, I know we will. All right, guys. Thanks for watching this. We'll catch you guys next week with another episode, and keep collecting.